Previously on Spenelli Speaks. But I think I'm gonna finish it. I think I'm gonna finish this book because it's so good.
Know you've been a good friend, and that's in the thick and thin, and I know it's never gonna end, 'cause you've been a good friend.
Hi everyone, Dani here. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in February. So if you are new here, make sure you take some time and hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you can check out all of my videos about reviews and some of my weekly vlogs. If you've been around the block a few times, welcome back. As always, it is so nice to see you. Now in February, we had a mishmash of reading. We had a few lingering reads, we had a few buddy reads, and we had a few read-alongs, as well as a few books here in between. Now, I did end up reading, it looks like 2, 4, 6, 7 books in the month of February. So those are books that I actually finished, which is great. I think that's a great number. Considering my Goodreads goal for the year of 2022 is 50, I think I'm ahead of the game at this point. Now, come next month and the preceding months, I may have a little bit more difficulty reading. So I'm trying to get as many books in now as I can to kind of help with that. But I'm not holding myself to anything. Anywho, so let's talk about a book that I'm still reading. Obviously, if you follow me, you know I have a couple of lingering books that just keep staying on my TBR. And the only one that I got any reading in of those 3 books, that shall not be named other than this one, was Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. I did get a few chapters read in this book, and I may have mentioned that in one of my vlogs, but last time you heard me check in about this book, the group had split up for varying reasons, and we're kind of seeing blurbs of each group per chapter. And this has really gotten interesting because one of the characters that I really like, his name is Perrin. We're learning a little bit more about him and what he may be capable of. And I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but that has been really fun. I really like that Robert Jordan has given something to each of the characters and not just done this chosen one kind of genre. I feel like it is a chosen one book, but each character has their own traits as well that really stand out and make them special. So we meet this man in the woods who lives with wolves, and it was really fascinating. I really liked that. And then we get a little bit more with Matt and the main character, which for some reason Rand, whoa, that just like left my head. Again, baby brain. And I've never really liked Matt, and now we found out something else about him, and now I'm worrisome that Matt is going to cause a lot of trouble. And again, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but still enjoying this book, just very slowly reading it. So that's how far I got into that. If you're curious about my process, or excuse me, how I'm progressing in that book, I am putting little notes in Goodreads, so feel free to follow me in Goodreads. The link is in the description. Then one of the first books that I read in February, so you may have seen me talk in great length of this book in one of my vlogs, my early vlogs in February, but Chez is a French book, and it's really small. It's not very big at all. It's less than 200 pages. Oh, it's 235 pages. I would say this was very reminiscent to Chocolat, in the fact that there is this single woman who is trying to like restart her life. She opens a restaurant, and she's actually good at it. Not the business part, but she can cook kind of thing. And you find out that she has a past, and it's caused her to have this new future. So in meeting with her, and it's all from her perspective, we meet other characters, which personally, I like all of the side characters way more than I liked the main character. I think her name is like something with an M. I can't even... It's not worth remembering. I didn't give this a very good rating. I think it looks like I gave it a 3. So it was okay rating. But the main reason I gave it a lower rating is because of my engagement piece. The thing that she does that ends up making her estranged from her family and pretty much everyone she knows is she participates in a like sexual affair with a minor. And I don't care who you are or where you live. I don't think that's right. So that really was bothersome to me because so I instantly, as you figure that out, and it's not just like, oh, he's 17. It's she was definitely having feelings for this child when he was like 12 and acted on it later on. And then it turned out to be a whole scam and whatever. It doesn't matter. She did it. And through her thoughts and memories, we know that she had already like had feelings for this child, like when they were a child. So yeah, anywho. So that was really bothersome to me. So if that is bothersome to you, don't pick this book up. Beside that, the book was written nicely and the side characters were great, and it is like a, I don't want to say coming of age story because that implies it's a younger person, but you know, she really does go through these moments of, you know, reinvention and just finding her way and finding new love in an older man. But it just, that one piece just kept stinging in the back of my head, and I just like, I can't like this person. So that's why I gave it a lower rating, but it ended up being a 3, so that's not terrible. I will be unhauling this book just because I really just don't want to keep it. So that'll be going back to the thrift store. Someone else can maybe enjoy it. I don't know. Another book that I read, this was my book club pick for DoubleBookedCo's book club. We read Snow Falling on Cedars by David Guterson. If you're at all interested on a more lively discussion, I'll link the live discussion that we had in February for this book. A lot of great thoughts there. Overall, I think when it came down to it, I gave this book a 3-star rating, and it was really because a lot of the thoughts were underdeveloped. A lot of the things that should have been developed more just kind of fell flat. And I feel like the book should have given those ideas more clarity and more resolve. So what this book is about is it's kind of between the 1940s and 1950s. A man is found dead, and it is assumed that he is has been murdered. And a Japanese man is accused of the murder. The man that is found murdered is like German American, so he's white. So a white man is found dead, and they blame it on the Japanese American, which is asinine. The way that, I mean, so this book is heavily based on a racial issue between basically all white people and these Japanese Americans that live on the coast, that have lived there for generations. Okay, so you can tell I'm a little heated about the prejudice in this book and the racism in this book. And it's addressed in the way that everyone is showing their true colors as far as like if they, you know, are a human being or not. But I don't feel like the author properly addresses it or resolves it or anything. I feel like he just shows you and goes, yeah, they suck at life. But anywho, we also follow the accused man's wife and a reporter whose name is Ishmael. We go back in time and we see that they kind of had a high school love interest, you know, tryst thing. And we see the dynamic there between a white boy and a Japanese American girl, and how it's like a forbidden love kind of thing. And how that develops or doesn't, and how people feel in their adulthood about that. And that piece, the love piece, I was like, doesn't need to be in this book. I felt like it was two contrasting storylines, and it just didn't feel authentic. I really think that if you were to write about one or two of these things, they should have been in separate books, because I feel like if you would have left the love story behind, you could have better developed the true plot of the story. Or if you wanted to write a love story, then you could have just focused on that. So yeah, but all in all, it still got 3 stars because, again, the writing style was okay. And my engagement was, you know, I was interested in where it was going and more hopeful than anything that certain things would be addressed. But overall, I just think a lot of things were underdeveloped, and I did not appreciate that. But I feel like it's a book that people should read to start a conversation, to talk about this time frame, to talk about Japanese internment camps, and talk about, you know, the prejudice and the racism and how that affected this area. But overall, I just feel like the author didn't really do it justice. So that's my take on the matter. Then to something a little saucy. You all know I read Wuthering Nights, which is an erotic retelling of Wuthering Heights. I think 2 years ago I read Jane Eyre Laid Bare, which was an erotic retelling of Jane Eyre, and that was terrible. It was literally the author took Jane Eyre, well, pieces of Jane Eyre, and then just inserted sex scenes into the actual book. It just didn't seem like anything was proper. Not that that is proper at all, but I find these books kind of funny. So I did read this in its entirety. I don't know why, because it wasn't great. And the only thing I can say that was better, like if I were to compare Jane Eyre Laid Bare and Wuthering Nights, is that this author didn't just pluck in sex scenes. She developed scenes around these characters' personalities in her book, interwoven into the Wuthering Heights book. So in this, you know, the brooding, revengeful Heathcliff in this book are those things, but he's also like a crazed, like misogynistic, like all that stuff, the like tie people up and spanking and all that naughty stuff. That's what he is. But to me, and don't get me wrong, I am no prude. I, in occasion, have read erotic stories. But this was to a whole nother level. Like, he was a little crazy. Very domineering. He was definitely the dominant one in every situation, almost to the point, well, I'm just going to say it. I think there was a few situations where there was no consent. And I was like turned off by that, and I was like, you know, flash through those pages because it just made me feel really uncomfortable because I was like, wow, like this is really like violent. Like it's violent. Like that's what I would use. I would use the word violent. And then to have the other character like be frightened in the beginning, but then like it, I didn't like that. So I ended up giving this, I think, 2 stars again, because I mean, Wuthering Heights is not your writing, and you just kind of, you made a really terrible character even worse. Like, ugh, it was bad. It was bad. But yeah, I did finish that one. Yeah. Speaking of Wicked, I read Wicked. And I listened to this on audiobook. If you recall in my TBR, I mentioned that I've tried to read this a few times, but really wasn't able to get past the first couple of chapters. So I found it on my Hoopla account for an audio read, and I listened to that while I was taking care of the nursery, painting and whatnot. And I did like it. Let me see here. What did I rate this one? I gave this one a 3-star rating. So it sounds like I'm like way into the 3 stars this month, but 3 stars aren't bad. So yeah. I think what knocked it down from like a 4-star is just my engagement, because it is quite long and it goes over the same things over and over again. And I felt like some of the stuff wasn't really resolved properly. But I mean, of course, you have to stick to the story. You can't just change it, because we all know Wizard of Oz, and not the movie Wizard of Oz, the book. And it follows the book quite nicely. It does have some of those characters. It has the quadlings. It has, you know, the China people and China tea cups. If you're familiar with Wizard of Oz, you know what I'm talking about. And I felt like I liked where the author went with creating the Wicked Witch of the West's character. But I also felt like it was really contradictory towards the end, because all of the witches were like, there was no reason why they would have been called witches. It was really weird. It was confusing, because there was nothing that they did that like should have garnered that name. And then they just like, it was almost like self-proclaimed, like, yes, I'm the Wicked Witch of the West. But you're really not. Like, you weren't really it was weird. It was weird. But anywho, the full book is the life and times. So you start off with her being born, and she's kind of like a monstrosity, because not only is she green, but she's born with these crazy teeth. They end up falling out and she gets like regular teeth. But everyone's like afraid of her, and there's this nanny character that like treats her more like a real child, and then you see her go to like a daycare and then you see her go to a like college like school, and she is all about animal rights, because there's animals that are animals, like you're just pet animals, but then there's animals that are capable of learning and speaking and teaching and all that. So there's a lot of controversy with that, a lot of political controversy with that. And the whole book, the rest of the book as a whole is a lot of like political stuff and just really interesting concepts for a fantasy world. It was really interesting. And that's where, at the end, where I was like, this is really kind of interesting. And then when Dorothy comes into the picture, it gets a little weird, and you can tell that the author's trying to stay in tune with Wizard of Oz, but at the same time, it was kind of like everything that the Wicked Witch of the West had done previously, it doesn't make sense that she would have been like that at the very end and then ended up being killed. So it was weird. Like, and I'm sorry, that's not a spoiler. If you've read Wizard of Oz, you know that she dies. But anywho, yeah. So overall, like, I really liked the middle chunk of the book, but the very beginning and the very end are a little bit off kilter for me. So I did give it 3 stars, but I did enjoy my reading. So there's that. And then another book that I read with a friend on BookTube, Kim over at Bookmarks and Breadsticks. We read Hooked together, which is Food, Free Will, and How Food Giants Exploit Our Addictions by Michael Moss. I think overall, Kim and I felt differently about this read. I ended up giving this 3 stars, but like a low 3 stars. It was like a 2.6, but with rounding, with Goodreads, that's 3. I was not hooked on this book. My engagement levels were pretty low. I did read it physically, and I know Kim listened to it on audio, so that could have been a lot of the difference. There are a lot of dry spots in this book. Now, it is nonfiction, of course, so I mean, I'm not expecting any, quest or, big fantasy read, but I think I was intending for it to be a little bit more engaging. So this book talks about how like food companies use different methods to kind of addict their people, their audiences, to the foods. Now, when they got into specifics, I found that was really interesting because there was a couple of instances where I like specifically remember things. Like, I remember when McDonald's had to take their supersize off their menu. I remember certain things about like when Oreos all of a sudden had all these different flavors. And so I remember certain things because in the 90s is where a lot of this stuff like exploded. So there's a lot of things that it was cool to learn about because I was like, oh, I remember that. But everything else I was just like, oh my gosh. And there was like really long sections about industries that didn't have anything to do with food. So we learned a lot about like tobacco and how the tobacco addiction is what kind of, you know, was the catalyst to looking into food addiction. So with like lawsuits and everything. So like there was a lot of parts where I'm just like, oh my goodness, why do we have to read this? So yeah, it was pretty dry. I would say if you're super interested in this kind of stuff, you would probably like this book. If you're like me and you're kind of like just dipping your toes in, I don't think this is the book for you. I felt it was very dry. I felt like in places where it really engaged you, it never resolved those issues. So yeah, for me, it was a low 3. So high 2, low 3. A buddy read that I read that was really fantastic was my buddy read with Naomi over at Naomi's Bookshelf, and I'll put an image here. But we read the second book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, which is Good Girl, Bad Blood. Now, this book follows the same character as the first. Her name is Pip, and in the first book, she sets off to solve a cold case. So I don't want to give too many spoilers away about the second book, but in the second book, she runs a podcast based on that case. Like, she reveals all of what happened and all the details. And then someone goes missing. So she starts a new case. And it's really interesting. I can tell you, since filming this, or since not filming this, or however, I've read the third book already with Naomi. We read it super fast, just like the other two. And let's just say, once you've read all 3, it makes all 3 so much better. So we'll talk more about that next month in that wrap up. But as a whole, I think the whole series is amazing. If you like mystery thrillers, definitely pick that up. And then the last book that I read in February, which is actually January and February, was a read-along with Emily from Novel Novels. We read Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Picture here. And I listened to that on audio. I definitely think if I didn't listen to that on audio, I would not have been able to get through it because it is a massive read. And the audiobook is excellent. It has like dramatized pieces, and it also has like a little bit of music between the chapters. And what's really fantastic is, if you've read this book or you know of this book, it is very dialogue heavy. Like, it's extremely heavy in the dialogue. And I know I just said that just 2 different ways. This baby brain, I can't speak. And with it being on audio, the narrator does such a fantastic job of making those conversations come to life. So that for me was really what made the read, because I was really able to get into the heads of these people. If you don't know, Wolf Hall follows Thomas Cromwell in his actions with helping King Henry VIII basically divorce his wife, Queen Catherine, and then move on to Anne Boleyn. And we, see the people who are involved, what happens, the consequences of a lot of that, Thomas Cromwell's life himself, which was really interesting because in historical events, you kind of look down on Thomas Cromwell because it's kind of sleazy what they all did. Understandably so, before all of this, King Henry VIII and Queen Catherine had a very good long-standing marriage. But with this fear of not having a male heir really messed with his head, I guess, because quite frankly, after that, it's just a big snowball of crap. So it was really interesting, and especially if you're interested in that time era, it was a really nice, like, different perspective, and I really liked that. So I will be continuing on with that read-along. The next book is Bring Up the Bodies, and I'm excited to read that. I think that one's a little bit smaller, but again, I'm going to read that on audio. So those are all 7 of the books that I read in February, along with Eye of the World, which I'm still reading, and looking forward to everything that is coming up in March. But yeah, so did you read any of these books? Have you read any of these books? Any thoughts that differ from mine? I love to hear differing opinions. Maybe I missed something. But until next time, I hope you're all reading something great, taking care and staying safe. And as always, you know how it goes. Happy reading. Bye.
Good friend, and that's in the thick and thin.